Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor, and I thought it was a good time for a Hooray for Hungary video. And this pair of socks is connects me to Hungary in a very nitty kind of way because the last time I was there, which has been a while, I'm going to show you all some pictures, it was 2017. I bought this yarn in Budapest, and I want to say I've lost the label. It's been a while. It's probably a German yarn, and I think it was manufactured in Italy. Kind of struggled to find yarn stores at that particular point in time. I was there with my son. It wasn't like a key goal of my trip there, in contrast to my recent trips to Scandinavia during the year of my writing the Remnants of the Fiber Guild series. But I had started knitting and gotten pretty enthusiastic about it. And so we definitely had to hit a couple of yarn stores. I bored my son Culver just enough with that. And so, yeah, this yarn was my purchase. We were roughing it just a little bit. Had an Airbnb off of Lengyel tér. Lengyel actually means Polish in Hungarian. It's not like in the inner part of Pest. We were in the Pest side of Budapest, but it was near a big church and it had easy subway access. It was actually a pretty cool Airbnb because we had the whole apartment to ourselves, and she had a washing machine in there. She was super nice. Still a very fond memory. So I thought I'd show y'all some pictures. Now I'm thinking I need to go there again. So I'll just try to pick some highlights here, maybe encourage you now that you, maybe feel the same way I do, that the Fidesz party is out and the TISA party with Péter Magyar is in, hoping for, a lot of good things to happen, certainly better things than would have been happening. So 2017, so when we were there, is right in the middle of Orbán's reign, right? 2017. And, we didn't really notice personally the repression, but the people we met, yeah, they certainly did. I can tell you briefly about a few of our adventures. Of course, you can't go to Hungary without, enjoying the pigeons. And they just dropped my phone. Sorry about that. But yeah, there were a lot of pigeons, and I think they spoke fluent Hungarian, probably a lot more fluent than what I did. Let's see, I want to show you some highlights. So I was here with my delightful son, and he was, he was in his early 20s at the time, and I think it was only his second trip to Europe. Here is me in front of let me see if I can turn this over. This is an old phone, but in any case, there's yours truly. And in the back, you can make out the chain bridge, what they call the Landsheed in the back. Let's see. Here's a very cool statue. I'm drawing a blank, folks. So there's the Hősök, which is Hero Square, and I think that's where this is, but I'm not totally positive. So there still is. There's this big sort of it's kind of like a folk history open air museum. So Hungary was founded in 896. That was a while ago. 896. So in 1896 they had the millennium, and in preparation for that they had millennial exposition. They built this big, huge sort of park with replicas of old castles and buildings and stuff like that. And that is, if memory serves, is not far from where this statue is. Now here is, this is one thing, if you go to Budapest, there are a couple things you shouldn't miss. And one of them is the Matthias Cathedral. So I know all these things in Hungarian. The Matyás templom, it's not there. Now you can see it better. Sorry about the lighting. I am not the world's greatest filmographer, as you can tell. But look at that tile roof. Isn't that just exquisite? And this is just one of the prettiest churches ever. It's one of my favorite churches. And Fisherman's Bastion, I think that's where that statue is. Yeah, that statue that I was showing you earlier is outside the Fisherman's Bastion, which is next to the Matthias Church, and you can go up on those ramparts and you look over the Danube, the Duna. So yeah, that's where that statue is. I should know who it is. If you guys know who this is, I've forgotten. It's been too long. I don't know if his name was Istvan or Lajos or Arpad. That could be Arpad. It could be Arpad. Arpad was the guy who is credited with beginning the Hungarian nation. Here's, see if I can hold this up so you guys can see it. That's a view from the fisherman's bastion of Pest, the Pest side, looking at the parliament building. So we got some crazy good views. And inside the church, we have these exquisite stained glass windows. Very beautiful. I'm drawing a blank on the architectural history of this church, but it really is a gem. This is my favorite little window. It has a lot of sort of arabesque type painting on the inside. I can show you a little bit about that. But this window, it's kind of like this spiral that goes inward from the interior wall to where the window is, and that is the Paschal Lamb that shows up there. It's not huge. It's kind of so it looks a little bit like this from further out. Again, I'm gonna try to get the light, not the best light, for which I apologize, but hopefully you can kind of get just a feeling of it. So the St. Matthias Church is something that shouldn't be missed in Budapest. Here's my son. Of course, I'm just like oohing and ahhing and all of this. The interior painting is so busy and beautiful, and it reminds me of my love of color. There he is, kind of, I don't know, he's probably checking out Instagram, waiting for me to finish my contemplation. It's just one of my favorite places in the world. My first trip to Hungary was in 1980. So I was there when it was still under Soviet sway, shall we say. It was in February, so it was a really interesting time. The Russian Eastern influence was just so obvious in the way that people dressed and the way that they conducted themselves. Here's another view. This is the inside of the Móricz Templum, the St. Matthias Church. I just love all the interior painting. It's just so pretty. But in any case, so 1980, I was spending the year in France and had my roommate, Anne, was with me. Here's another cool detail from the Móricz Templum. And at that time, did not speak any Hungarian. I didn't really start learning that until 1987, 88. So we were very innocent. We were living in Paris, and we just were like, well, we want to see Eastern Europe. Kind of passed through like Munich, Vienna, ended up in Budapest. And counted at that point in time on finding a hotel at the train station. So in most European cities back then, it was the days of the Eurail cards. If you're my vintage and used to travel in Europe, you probably remember Eurail cards. And, you know, I would just throw myself at some train station, Rome or Milan, whatever, and just say, okay, where do I find the room? There's like an office at the train station. You go and they'll assign you a hotel room, a pensione, whatever it is. And, I've had experiences in Eastern Europe where they really weren't up to speed on that. So I got to the Nyugati pályaudvar, that's the Western Railway Station, which I'm going to show you a more recent picture of that from when my son and I went there. And I was, with my friend Anne, who looked very English, very American, very light-skinned, buxom, blonde. We didn't fit in. And we were kind of looking lost, and Arendar, a police officer, approached us. We were like, okay, what's going on? And we kind of said some English, maybe we threw in a little French to him, and he just pointed, he went like this, and he said, Szabadság. And we were like, okay, no idea what that means. He said it like 4 times, Szabadság, pointed across the street over, like, catty-cornered. And so we went across the way, and there was this it was like one of those type of angel moments, you know, where you see this beautiful hotel and the lettering across the top sort of indicated to us, here's another nice picture, that that was the word he had said. It means freedom, so it was the Freedom Hotel. Szabadság. Szabad is free, shag is the noun ending. And so we went in there and we got these really incredibly posh rooms for like $20. $20 a night, because obviously the dollar went a long ways in Budapest in 1980 in February. There's the exterior view of the Móricz temple. See if I can make that come in from a side street. There we go. Yeah, just a beautiful gem of a church. So anyway, we stayed there, I forget how many days. It was several days, and we just tooled around, went to a bunch of museums, and we're cold and stuff, and it was just really fun. Then the next time I went there was, so I spent a year in Germany, in Hamburg, that's why I speak German. So I spent 1987 to 1988 in Hamburg on the way to getting my doctorate in German. And here's another guy. I don't know who he is, but he looks really cool. It's outside of probably the art museum in Buddha Dome, the Buddha Hill. And by that point, I was learning Hungarian and had made some contacts. So I went there, I think it was the fall of 87, and spent some time getting to know some actual people. And made some contacts, because by then I was really interested in Hungarian literature, so it explains a little bit about my interest in Hungary. And my interest really revved up. If you're curious about the reason, not saying you are, but just in case, right? So when I was doing my graduate work in German, it just sort of dawned on me that historically Germany, I had grown up thinking about Western Germany, it was a West European nation. Well, historically that wasn't true. It was a Central European nation, and I decided that I wanted to profile myself as a scholar by learning another Central European language, and I chose Hungarian because it had really cool literature. Here's the Hősök. That's the hero square. My memory is coming back, people. It's been a while. I just had to celebrate Hungary, you know, so, and there my son is having a really keen time. I think we should go back. He wants to go to Oslo with me. We'll see. He can't get off work right now. But in any case, yeah, this is the same place. So 1987, kind of got to know some people, did some more like exploration of the art, the politics, the history of literature, decided I was going to try to get to the point where I could do Hungarian well enough to write on the literature. So, it's not to say that I'm like conversational, you know, but I'm actually a pretty good translator when it comes to Hungarian. I think this is also the Hősök, the hero square. Let's see if I can get that to come in. Petting the lion. I think I had this picture outside of my office for a while I was still a full-time prof. This is the St. István, the István church, where the relic, like the hand of St. Stephen is there. St. Stephen, way back when, around like 1000, is largely responsible for Christianizing Hungary. So that's the big basilica that has his name on it. And here is a picture of the Buda side of the Duna, the Danube. And we spent hours at all those museums up there. So after I got my doctorate, my trips to Hungary started to accumulate because I really wanted to learn the language better. And actually did research in that complex I just showed you at the library, the National Library of Hungary, which was really cool. It's another picture of the Móricz temple that we saw in 2017. And then when I was really trying to learn the language, there were these language programs that have actually been going on for a while. If you want to learn Hungarian, right, it's a pretty interesting language. It's really different. You can learn it in Debrecen, which is in the east. And Debrecen is kind of a really interesting city for my research. I've been there several times and spent like a couple of summers there at this program. They're called the Debreceni Nyári Egyetem, the Debrecen Summer University. This is a town not far from Budapest that we visited. And again, I'm drawing a blank on the name. But it's not too far from there, and it's really pretty. And it is a big tourist attraction. So the Debreceni Nyári Egyetem gave me a chance to really sort of get into my Hungarian skills. And I have a few more pictures, but I'm going to take just a quick excursion just in case you're interested. The main author I started working on as I got immersed is named Zsigmond Móricz. So this is a book that I wrote about Móricz. It's kind of a study of several novels. There's a picture of Debrecen from a postcard back in the day that I had them put on the cover. This book came out a couple years ago. I can tell you. 2023, maybe? Yep, 2023. The novels of Zsigmond Móricz in the context of European realism. So, people, he is actually a really, really good author. If you're at all interested in early 20th century authors along the lines of, like, William Faulkner, he's kind of like, he's a bit of a Hungarian answer to William Faulkner. It's not, like, you know, a great comparison, but, so he was born in the late 1880s. And died in 43. So he kind of, you know, World War II had begun. Things were not great. Hungary had been through a lot over all that time. And, you know, historically, Hungary has really been kind of racked by the stronger nations in their pull. You know, they're kind of credited in, I believe it was 1683, 1680 something, with sort of stopping the Ottoman progression across Europe, with sort of pushing back on the Ottoman Empire, but they paid a heavy price for that because a large chunk of Hungary was Turkish or Ottoman, at least for a while. Here's a picture of the subway in case you're interested. The subway in Budapest is really interesting because the Soviets kind of were responsible for a lot of it, and it's pretty damn good. So in any case, they were, you know, repressed. It's actually the birthplace of Unitarianism. One of the high points of Hungary was in, I think it was 1866 with the compromise with Austria. So Hungary was in the Habsburg Empire, but in 1866 they had enough sway and influence to get the empire to agree to designate Hungary a kingdom alongside other kingdoms. So they called it the Katoenkomonarchie. I've been calling it the Imperial Royal Monarchy. So it had this like dual crown type of emblem. They called it the dual monarchy. And that was after the 1848 revolution. Was really tragic for Hungary because Hungary held out the longest, and the 1848 revolution actually went to 1849, and like one of their greatest poets, who's named Petőfi, Sándor Petőfi, his poetry is from that era, and he was part of the revolution. There's just another cool building, can't remember what it is, but it's in Budapest, it's really cool. And then, so that was like the high point, and then they kind of got on the wrong side of history following Germany's lead, and in World War I, lost, Germany lost, Hungary lost. Hungary lost like 2/3 of its territory. So huge parts of what are today Romania, Slovakia, even to the south, like in, I call it Yugoslavia, right? So sorry, my history is kind of, it's a little bit dated there because I went to Yugoslavia when it was still Yugoslavia, but all those lands left. And Hungary was, you know, sort of truncated. Here's a really cool library that we went into. Again, off the top of my head, I can't remember where it was, but it's really cool. See if I can get that to focus. So that was a low point in Hungarian history. And they had kind of an agrarian economy, still aristocratic, land-based, even well into the 20th century, like World War I and all that stuff. It held them back. So it held them back with regard to their industry and to their economic development and their you know, industrial progress and all that stuff. So they never really had the same resources. Here's István Dobl, another sort of hero from medieval Hungary. They never had the resources, the advancement, the sort of wealth, power that lands further to the west did. So their literature is kind of interesting because it really reflects that sort of yearning to keep up in terms of civilization with like the thought, the thinking, the technology and stuff. There are a lot of really important Hungarians that left, like Pulitzer was one of them, and the guy who invented the Rubik's Cube, because it was frustrating to live in a country that was always under someone else's thumb. The Ottomans, the Habsburgs, then it was the Soviets. And then, 1989 was like really cool because then it just seemed like things were looking up. And then Orbán came along, and then we were back to like the corruption, the Putin-esque kind of manipulation, the repression, the illiberal, this effort to go back to really similar systems that had been in place under the Soviet, even after the 1956 revolution. Hungary still was just not as free. One of the interesting things, I don't think I have any pictures in here, but the repression in, up until 89 was so severe that, for example, if you have experience with Hungary, maybe you spent time there, you have feeling from there, I heard stories about the Black Maria. So the government was extremely repressive in the Soviet era, and if you said the wrong thing or got involved with the wrong people, they might send some agents after you. And there was this one street, this main drag, again, I'm drawing a blank on which it was, but you guys know what I'm talking about. There's this House of Terror museum that's on there now. And if people saw this sort of black, kind of fancy, mysterious car driving in the direction of what's now the Museum of Terror, it used to be this place where they just held people and questioned them, and maybe tortured them or whatever. That was kind of the atmosphere that people were living in up until 89. So 89 was really huge. And then we kind of went back to a lot of the repressive structures under Orbán. And it's just, I can't tell you how huge it is and how happy it makes me that that era has taken a big hit. Now here is, when we were there, we did a couple of experiences through Airbnb, and one of them was making wallets. So my son and I went on this experience. This is in Budapest, the Buda side. And this young woman gave little classes in leather crafting and helped us both make our own wallet. And here we are with the finished project. My son and I finished product. All her leathers were from Italy. It was really cool. So like I say, we didn't really personally experience the kind of repressive pressures. We could sort of ignore that. But one of the things we did, let me see if I can find pictures, was we went on this tour with a guy to, it's called the Medveoton, which means bear refuge. They, I hope it's still there. It's in Városegyház, which is north of Budapest. And so he drove us with this Irish lady. And of course, Trump was in office back then too. So we were like talking about him, and kind of going on and on. And of course, he was talking about all the repression of the administration that he was dealing with. And it was just fascinating. So we went and they, the Medveoton would rescue retired or maybe abused circus bears and give them, a place to live out their years, and you got to feed them. So here's a picture of my son feeding one of the bears at the Medveoton. It's a retired circus bear from Russia, I have to assume. It was a really cool experience, and as much fun as it was to feed the bears and to see all that, I think it was more interesting to get to talk to this guy about the political situation and the repression that was going on, and to kind of trade stories, because obviously we personally we weren't happy with our administration either, and the Irish lady was similar. It was just a really telling conversation, sharing our kind of political woes. So no, I don't know if that guy is still offering the experience, but it is worth considering. So yeah, one of the things you can experience in that particular town, I assume it's probably still there at Vedajadhaz, is the ice cream. It was really, really, really good. I think I still have this picture as a background image on one of my computers. And that is the little town. It's like a park in Vedaj. It has me and my son hanging out after our ice cream. So yeah, getting to the end of my pictures, I'll share the novels that I have translated by Móricz. So I've translated into English. I'm very proud of my translations. 3 of his novels, if you're interested, they're actually a pretty low-cost way to kind of get an introduction into his work. This is called In the God-Forsaken Hinterlands, A Tale of Provincial Hungary. These novels date to around 1920, around there. And this is a really interesting novel. It's a take on Madame Bovary, except the main character is not the wife, but it's the bored husband. So a really interesting example of Móricz was very well versed in Western literature because he was one of the editors of this publication that was called Nyugat. Nyugat means West, and it was a Western looking, it was during the period of Expressionism, realism, naturalism. I think you could argue successfully that there's a pretty heavy like Zola influence on Móricz. So if you're familiar at all with French naturalism, Zola, predecessor of Balzac, you might find these novels really interesting. This was his sort of breakthrough novel, Gold in the Mud, Hungarian peasant novel, and it's about, it's a really good example of the economic woes that were going on in Hungary in the early 20th century, because you have a peasant who wants to get away from the landed economy. He wants to make it in capitalistic terms. He wants to harvest and sell the products from his land, and he's like really good at it, but he needs some funds to get himself started, and the only way that he can access them is through the aristocratic lady who is in charge of everything, and doesn't really believe that the peasants are like creditworthy, that they are ready to sort of have agency in the capitalist economy. So it's a really, it's tragic. A tragic account of, a talented, smart peasant's attempt to rise in society and his failure because society is just out to get him. And then the other one I translated, and who knows, I might translate more. I've got a couple more in mind that I'm thinking about translating, but right now I'm working on my novel series. But this one, I called it Orphalina. So the original title is Adavachka, and it's basically about the objectification of a child. It's, you might not want to read this at night because it's gonna, it's gonna be like the Epstein files on steroids. But in any case, it's a little girl she's called the state child. Her like passport calls her Alami, Adavachka. Alami means state, belonging to the state. Her parents are gone. In fact, there's an interesting scene in here where I'm kind of speculating, ooh, that could be her mom, and nobody really knows, so I wrote an article about that. But she's sort of passed along from foster family to foster family because every family that gets to have her there has free labor and also gets money from the state. And there are things in there like, they're supposed to buy her clothes, well, they give them to the kids. And there's the guy next door, and, she's over there, and bad things are happening. And she just really never has a chance. So what's interesting about this story, well, a lot of things are interesting, but Móricz met a young woman, I think she was a teenager, I think it was in Budapest, who is basically like the model for this novel. And he actually married her and had a child. I think it's Litke Erzsébet is her name. So Elizabeth Erzsébet Litke, if I recall correctly, has been what's her name. But there are a lot of poetic elements in this novel that you'll really appreciate. It's a short read. It's not that long. But it really gives you insight into just some of the things that sort of like common, normal people in Hungary were experiencing, especially in the countryside. Of course, this one here is based in Debrecen. And probably the most famous novel of Móricz, which didn't need translating by me because it was already translated, it's called Légy jó min halálig, Be Good Until Death. Some people translate it as Be Faithful Unto Death. That's not really what it means or what it says. Yo is good. But there's a movie that was based off it, and it's about a schoolboy. Some people think it kind of recounts some of Móricz's own experiences as a schoolboy in Debrecen. So it's out there, you know, if you're interested, you could find that. But these, you know, to the extent that you're like on my author page in Amazon or whatever, translations, I recommend them. They've gotten good reviews. They've been, they have, like this one has formed the basis of scholarly analysis on the part of Hungarians who wanted an English version to look at and didn't have it. So I'm very proud of how they turned out. And as a sort of a final parting shot, this video got a little bit long, which I apologize for, but hopefully, you know, you're with me on Let's Celebrate Hungary. I got this bag at the Winterfest. This lady would find odds and ends at Goodwill, Salvation Army, whatever, that she can convert into project bags. So this is obviously a table runner that was must have been stitched in Hungary or by a Hungarian. This is typical of their, what they call the hímzés, the embroidery with this kind of rose type pattern. And I put a skein of Italian sock yarn in here that I got in Scandinavia, thinking I should celebrate with this nice sparkly yarn and start a new pair of socks and use this project bag to celebrate. So I'd be curious to know your associations with Hungary, if you have any. If you're curious, you know, if you would consider maybe now that the government's kind of shaping up a little bit better, going there. They have a credible craft history, craft traditions, which I have explored, particularly the embroidery. I've seen exhibits, and in Debrecen did a lot of like they have Skansen there. They have so there's the Hortobágy is this sort of it's a national park where there used to be like forests and trees, and then during the Turkish occupation it was all razed. It all just went away. So it's just like this huge flat land meadow near around the bend of the Tisza River. And they have the Csíkosok, the Hungarian horseback riders that they ride bareback, and they can ride 2 horses at a time, and they can do these really cool things. And they had folk dancing and music and all the rest. It was just fantastic. So I highly recommend Hungary. It's really, and it's not that expensive, you know, so economic woes, they'd probably appreciate your tourist dollars. A lot of cool things to see. I didn't show you the pictures of the Nyugati pályaudvar, the railway station. It was really run down when we were there. I think now it's probably been developed, but I could go on and on. In any case, Hungary, put a comment in there if you have anything to say about Hungary, if you're interested in it, if you've been there. Appreciate your taking time out to listen today. Y'all take care. Talk soon. Bye.